Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast, and welcome back to Tova Olsson to the podcast for the second time.
Thank you. Thank you for re-inviting me.
Yeah, I'm so excited. It wasn't too long ago that we spoke and we got into a lot of interesting topics. And since then, you've also been a teacher to me in my religious studies. So that was really fun to learn from an academic side about Tantra and getting into that. So maybe reintroduce yourself shortly for those that haven't listened to the other podcast. I really recommend everyone to listen to that as well to get a deeper insight into your own journey. But yeah, just an introduction, and then we can get into the topic of today.
Sure. So my name is Tova Olsson. I'm a scholar of religion and a yoga teacher. I've been teaching yoga for about 20 years now, getting older, and always been very interested in the philosophical and mythological sides of yoga. And now when I'm doing my PhD in the university, I'm researching gender constructs in contemporary European Tantra. So I'm very interested in contemporary forms of yoga and Tantra, and also, of course, very interested in classical or traditional forms of yoga and Tantra. So that is basically what I spend my life studying and practicing.
It's so amazing. And I really love the combination of doing the studies and the research and all of that, because we're very similar in that way. We love both aspects, and then the embodied practice and experience and the lived tradition within ourselves. So it's really in that way you can bring so much to your classes, to your students from different perspectives. I really love that about you. And you have a really inspiring Instagram page as well that's I think how I found you, and just seeing the artwork that you publish there, which maybe we're not used to seeing those depictions of the gods and goddesses, but it's really, I would really recommend everyone to check it out as well. We'll link to it in the show notes. So yeah, and I'm really excited for you to share about your book that have been published for a while but is now available in English to the world. So maybe get into that, how you like what your intention was with writing the book, and who is it for?
Yeah. So excuse my voice today. I have a really bad cold. So the book, well, what happened is that I held this theoretical education for yoga teachers in Sweden, and it was about the history, philosophy, and mythology of yoga, because I felt like when people came out of a yoga teacher training, or maybe multiple yoga teacher trainings and immersions, and people that have been teaching yoga for a long time, they still didn't know so much about the history and philosophy of yoga. Actually, none of us really did, because that whole research area was pretty new at that time. And so I spent a year teaching this education, and every time we saw each other, we spoke about another aspect of the history of yoga, the history of Tantra, different philosophical schools, different texts that we usually reference in contemporary yoga, such as Yoga Sutra, Bhagavad Gita, Devi Mahatmya, the Ramayana, even Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, which is tantric meditation manual that a lot of us use without really knowing that these are, well, we use the meditation techniques without really knowing where they come from. And so after having spent this year educating all of these yoga teachers, I took the text material that I had produced for the education and I rearranged it into a book that I thought, this is something that is needed in Sweden. We need something that we can use in yoga teacher trainings for people to have, you know, a text source that references academic material, and that also is written from the point of view of, a practitioner. So I really took on the scholar practitioner perspective and wrote something that I felt like I would have wanted to read when I was, becoming a yoga teacher, or in my early years of being a yoga teacher, maybe even the later years. So that book was published in Sweden in 2021. And then it was picked up by an Indian publisher, actually the oldest Indological publisher in India, named Motilal Banarsidass. So it was a great honor for me when they asked if I wanted to publish this book in English through them. And so we went through that process, and the book was just published now in 2023, just a month back or so. So it's available in English through the publisher, Motilal Banarsidass, and also through Amazon. And the Swedish one is available in all the Swedish bookstores, and you can also order it directly from me. So yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what a great thing to, from your experience of practicing for so many years and then also teaching, to gather all that information up. Because for me, I've not been a yoga teacher probably for as long as you have, but at least for 6 years, I've never studied into the philosophy that deeply at all, because there's so many aspects that we can get into. But I would love for you to explain why the text and the knowledge and wisdom within your book could be important for yoga teachers, but also for other people who are just interested in the tantric traditions.
Well, I think that when we teach yoga, or when we just take a yoga class, we are exposed to a lot of fragmented point of views, right? Because a lot of yoga teachers they will borrow something from the Yoga Sutra or from the Bhagavad Gita, and then they will apply their own experience, or maybe their teacher's experience, onto this book. And that is fine, right? That is how we do when we teach. But at the same time, I think it's very important, when you call yourself a yoga teacher and when you refer to these ancient texts, that you are actually familiar with the historical context where they were produced and what they actually mean in that historical context. So what I'm trying to do in these chapters of the book is just to show that, well, we can use the text in this way, and we need to apply our own wisdom and experience onto our reading and when we teach, for sure, but also just to go back to what they really mean in the context where they first showed up, and also to see how come that these particular texts are so important for us in the West today, because there are so many different yogic texts, there are so many different yogic traditions and tantric traditions. So how come that just a few texts are available to us, or are pretty much, obligatory in every single yoga teacher training? So that is something that I've been highly fascinated about, especially since the Yoga Sutra, for example, is something that academics will refer to as a forest text, meaning that it's a text that is, aimed for people that are renunciates, or that have a renunciate bend, in a way that that you are really focused on reaching. I think we spoke about the last time when we saw each other, the concept of freedom known as kaivalya, the separation between purusha and prakriti, between the knower and that which is to be known, or the knower and the field, as it is sometimes called, or the witness and nature. And so, excuse me, I could just hear my son leaving. He was at home for a little while, and now he went back out, so I could just hear the door slamming. So yeah, I just think that it's very important that we know, why am I using this text? Am I just using it because my teacher used it, or because I learned in the yoga teacher training that this is like the only yoga text that everyone should be referencing? So I just wanted to open up to maybe have people look at other texts that might be more suitable to a modern householder worldview, and also just, inform people about that there's just not one yoga philosophy as we normally say, but there are different philosophical schools known as darshana. And darshana, as you know, mean view. You can have the darshana of a deity when you go into a temple. So when you see the deity and the deity sees you, you have darshan. But darshan also means view, philosophical view. So I usually talk about this as kind of a roadmap, and that it doesn't really matter if we practice a lot if we don't have a map to know where we're really heading. And then when we have the map in front of us, we can see, well, is this a suitable goal for me? Is this my view of what liberation really entails? And then maybe we need to change our map, or see that, this map will take me in a different direction than where I was heading. So that is very much how I look at yoga philosophy and how necessary it is for us as practitioners, because we can absolutely keep on practicing year after year if we don't have the intention of going anywhere. But if we have the intention of going somewhere, a roadmap is crucial in a way.
Yeah, definitely. And how important it is as a teacher to also have your inner, like you said, inner practice and development in order to convey that to others. Because I spoke about this on another podcast about the importance of the inner work that we're doing probably should take up more of the space than the outer work that we're doing, because otherwise it's never gonna be filled up, and then we will not be fulfilled of the teachings that we're trying to spread. And I'm gonna say also that for me, we just finished the course at university with you and another teacher in Hinduism and Buddhism, and my point of view have also changed then a lot. From I was not aware, because we've been taught in certain lineages, right? I've done like a more Western yoga teacher training, then I did the Shivananda yoga teacher training, and that's like one view. And as you said, there's so many, when you look at the history and the way that we've in the West have seen also what yoga is, it's so narrow that it's not enough. So if we don't continue to study, and maybe we don't continue to study because it is hard, like you say, it's hard to find something, texts that resonate. So it's really great that you've done, like you put in all of your experience and also scholarly and academic knowledge into your book. And I would love to know how is the book, what is the structure of the book? What can we expect when we get the book?
So the book doesn't contain all of my experience because it's a thin little book, right? So it's really for people to begin to have a sense of, to be able to start cultivating discernment in a way. You know that I am a devotee of Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge and discernment. And so I just, as I said, just wanted people to be able to really figure out, what is what in the history of yoga, in the philosophy of yoga, to not have all these entanglements between different traditions and so on. So that is one thing, but I have that book here. For those of you watching the video, you can see the book and it looks pretty much the same in English. So it begins with, a short introduction where I talk about my view. So just to be transparent about, who the book is for and what my point of view is. And then the first chapter is on the history of yoga, where I'm just trying to draw a timeline from, some of the stories that we have about the history of yoga, like, that it originated in the Vedas, or it originated in the Indus Valley, and then speak about what is correct and what we know and what we don't know as academics. about these matters. And then we're talking about, that the Shramana traditions, the early strivers, as they're called, which are, the early aesthetic traditions that began in about the same time that Jainism and Buddhism also evolved. And so these early aesthetic traditions where people were very much concerned about leaving the wheel of samsara, leaving that wheel of painful repetition where we are constantly frustrated. So we recognize, some compositions of word like sarvam dukkham, everything is suffering, from the Buddhist tradition, from the Jain tradition, and also from the early yogic traditions, where people were really feeling like, well, there is so much suffering in the world, and all of this suffering is really grounded in the fact that we identify with all of the things that are changing, when we should be identifying with the things that are not changing, with the thing that is eternal. So this is kind of, the early concept. And this is not the full history of yoga, because then we have later developments into Tantra, into different philosophical systems, of course. But this is like the earliest seed of yoga, in a way, is this concept of wanting to get rid of suffering, and then learning to, create the separation between the eternal and that which is forever changing. And so then we move into the developments of yoga through classical yoga, the yoga of Patanjali, through Tantra, through Hatha yoga, all the way to modern postural yoga, so to say, or Anglophone transnational yoga, as it's also called. And then the second chapter is about philosophy. And then we speak about what we already mentioned, the darshana, and what is the difference between talking about philosophy, the love of wisdom, in a Western sense, and darshana, this viewpoint that is very much, as you would say, soteriological, meaning that it will take you towards liberation. So I speak a little bit about the fact that in Western philosophical systems, this is not always true, of course, but a lot of time they're very speculative. It's wisdom for the sake of wisdom, in a way. But then in the Indian philosophical traditions, you're really, merging philosophy and sadhana, merging practice with the view in order to gain liberation. So you're not sitting around and speaking about philosophy just because you love to speak about philosophy, even though I'm sure that has happened also, because in the Indian traditions you had, a lot of debates and discussions about philosophy, and people were, chastised for losing in these philosophical debates and so on. But that is a different subject. So then let's speak about, the philosophical system of Samkhya, which is the philosophical system that Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, for example, is grounded in. And then I speak about Vedanta, I speak about Advaita Vedanta and Neo-Vedanta, the modern forms of Vedanta that is very much a melange, a blending of different philosophical systems. And I also speak a little bit of Tantra and different scriptures and so connected to this. And then we move into chapters on the Yoga Sutra and the Bhagavad Gita, and then I speak about, as I said, how come these texts have become so important for us in the Western yoga world, and now also in India. How come, these particular texts were raised to this canonical status, in a way. So, and I speak a little bit about what is in the books, but the chapters are more about the historical development of the texts, in a way, than about what is really in the texts. And then there's a chapter about the Ramayana, and speaking about the Bhakti tradition and the development of the Bhakti traditions, the devotional traditions. And then there's a chapter about the Devi Mahatmya, the great glory of the goddess, the great Shakta Tantra text about the goddess slaying all the demons. And then I also speak about, the meaning of Kundalini for us as contemporary practitioners. And then there's a chapter about the history of Tantra, the development of Tantra, which is, of course, a huge subject, but I'm doing my best to compile it, compromise it. And then there is one chapter on the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra that I already mentioned, which is a meditation manual from the classical tantric tradition with a lot of, there's 112 meditation techniques in it. And so a lot of them we practice with them in contemporary yoga, but we don't know that these are tantric traditions. And so I'll speak a little bit about that text. And then the very last part of the book is about mythology. And there I share, why I think storytelling is so important, why I think mythology is so important for us as human beings. And then I share some mythological stories about Ganesha, about Shiva and Parvati, about the goddess Durga, about the goddess Lakshmi, and about Hanuman, the great monkey deity. And so that is the whole book. But my hope is that when you're done reading the book, of course, a lot of people will not read the whole book in one sitting, so to say. Maybe you will go back to a chapter when that starts to interest you for some reasons. Or if you're a yoga teacher, maybe you will come back to different chapters whenever there's something particular that you need to inform yourself about or that you're going to teach about. And that is the feedback that I've gotten from a lot of yoga teachers in Sweden, that they use the book to kind of come back to it and to remind themselves about different historical facts and also philosophical facts and so on. Yeah.
That's incredible to get so much in one book where you can always reference back to, and just to see the patterns and as you said, it's one of the what I've seen in, at least in like more the classical teachings in yoga, it's a lot of storytelling, because stories, it stays with us because they invoke emotion. So even if we don't take the story as a literal thing that's happened, it still invites something that we can remember and to see how that can be applied. Because I also wanted to ask about the application. So the book is actually really taking in a lot of different scriptures and the history and all of that. And how can we benefit from these in our daily life and the daily tantric practice? How would you describe it from your experience?
Well, I think I write in the beginning of the book that, knowledge can be bondage. When, we can also be confused or overwhelmed or obsessed with information and, never feel like we know enough and so on. And that is, an obstacle in a way. But it's also an obstacle to just think that, I only have to go to this source and, because I had a period like that when I was practicing, when I was like, why am I studying so many different books? I should just read one. I should just study one book and I'll be less confused, and I will find all of this if I dig deep enough into this particular scripture. But that is simply not true. We need a broad understanding. We need a contextual understanding to get a sense of how this great jigsaw puzzle comes together. And for me, at least, as a highly theoretical and critical person, it's been very, very important to really try to understand how these things go together. Also because I'm a practitioner that don't like to waste my time. I'm practicing for liberation. And so I don't want to waste my time with techniques that are not suitable for my goal, right? And so that has been part of all of this, to just also to try to figure out what is for me, what are the most efficient techniques, what have worked throughout the ages, so to speak, and what is really directed towards a totally different goal than the one I'm heading towards. So I don't know if that was the answer to your question. There was a lot in your question. But to come back to the storytelling as well, I mean, that is, I really think, true mythology. A lot of the things that are going on in my life and in my practice, I constantly apply mythological characters and stories to it. I can really see the unfoldment of my own processes through the mythological stories. And so I also write in the book that mythology is something that that never happened, but always is. You know, that this is something that eternally repeats itself through us. You know, these are not only deities, but archetypes, meaning original patterns, meaning patterns that are available all through reality, but also in us, right? So there is so much to say about that. And also as a philosophy teacher, I find it so skillful to work with mythology, because people love to hear a good story, right? But it's so difficult to listen to philosophical discussions and to hear all the different concepts and the terminology, and you're constantly confused about what is what. But then when you listen to the story, it all kind of, you know, lands into your heart. And then it's so much easier to come back to the mythological story and see, oh, well, this is actually philosophy. This actually tells about, you know, liberation in this way, or, you know, yeah, there's a lot to say about that.
Yeah, very, very true. There is a lot. I mean, it's like when you open up one can, then you get so much more. Like you said, also, I love the fact that the diversity of things that we take in, sometimes it can become overwhelming. There's so much, but at the same time, they give different nuances. And also, I would say for people who are not in, let's say if you're working, you're on your spiritual path, a lot of people who listen to the podcast are already maybe having some practice. It's always good to understand. What I've seen now that we've studied holistically over this year is that there are sometimes things from all traditions that you can take from and to integrate. And also it can help you expand your awareness of the things that you are focusing on still. It can always add something, because it's also, I love that when you start studying the history, you see like the pattern and the tangible evolution. Sometimes we lose sight because we're very, very, well, we don't learn it in school. We don't go that deep. We learn certain things in school, and then we're not taught of this very diverse world that we live in. So I think that's really good, a good perspective. And I'm really curious because in the last podcast, we talked deeper about the different traditions. I have like one intuitive question because it's something that's come up this week a lot. And then a more like logical question regarding what you're researching right now. But I would love to hear from you. So you know how different, probably it's the same for you when you are in this practice of devotion and you're really in tune with life and the universe. Certain forms of divinity can come into your consciousness. And for me, it's been Kuan Yin. And I would say it's like for the past couple of days, it's like all of a sudden she's come up for me. So I would love to know from your studies, like, and maybe your experience, if you have anything that you would like to share that can illuminate like the importance of this aspect of the divine.
Of Kuan Yin?
Yeah.
Or, oh, Lady of Compassion. Yeah, I had a Kuan Yin period as well. I think we all go, maybe, I'm not going to say we all pass through it, but there might be something to it. So I moved last year, but before that, I lived for 12 years in a vacation together with my kids. And there was a forest and a river close by, and there was a temple right there, which is quite unusual when you think about that. I lived, you know, in a big city in Sweden, but there was an Asian temple right close by, and they had this gorgeous statue of Kuan Yin right outside of the temple. So pretty much on a daily basis, I would go down into the forest by the river. I would cross this little bridge over the river, and I would go say hi to this deity and offer her something, a piece of candy or a flower or something, and just ask for her compassion, ask for her help. So for me, she's very much, that lady of compassion. Maybe for me, she was mostly a support in my motherhood, helping me through all of the things that you go through as a single mother with small children and then older children and all of the different aspects of that. And so I don't have any, sadhana experience of Kuan Yin. I know that I tried at some point to do a formal sadhana to her, but it just didn't take off, and for me, I practiced long enough to say that, well, this is not a matter of me, not trying or not being patient. I could just see that the energy wasn't there. And I'm really not practicing within a Buddhist tradition. And I never really felt attracted, except for, some forms of Tara and Kuan Yin, to a Buddhist deity. But I'm really in, Hindu tantric lineages, and that is very obvious. When you look around in my room, you can see it. If you could see the view on the other way, see how my desk look, you would see it even more. I have Saraswati and Parvati and Matangi and Lakshmi right here with me, but Saraswati is definitely in focus. She has the royal seat, so to speak. So my experience of Kuan Yin is that she's a really, really soft and lovely energy to work with, but not somebody that I have great experience with in sadhana or really working deeply with. She's just been a sweet presence in my life for many years. Yeah.
That's really beautiful. I love that. Thank you for sharing that, because I felt like I think it comes in the right, when you are in tune, then you start working deeply. I think that's what I feel like is the most beautiful thing with being on a path, whichever you are, that you invite something in that feels supportive. Like you said, it's a supportive, whatever it is. I mean, right now I'm in also like connecting a lot with the plants and now that everything is growing again in Sweden, we have different phases, right? It's here in Sweden, we have like this inner, like the outer winter becomes our inner winter. We really go within. That's really beneficial as well. And then working with these external physical spirits is also very beautiful at this time. And especially I appreciate it so much because it's been there but hidden for a long time for us. So, and then these energies come in to assist like in the right time as well in life. So I really love that. And the more I'm really, I don't know if we got into it last time. I'm actually very curious about the subject that you're researching, because I think for people who are still like listening to this and haven't listened to the first one, to understand more about Tantra, can listen to the first episode we did. I think it was like a month or two back. But I would love to know if you can share anything that you've seen in your studies so far. I know you're still in it and doing the research, and also like what is the importance of the research that you're doing right now with gender and Tantra and that whole thing?
Yeah, I think I did speak a little bit about it last time, and I don't think I've really progressed that much, because if you've ever done a PhD, you know that everything takes time. Mostly, I mean, I'm researching living people, and there's a lot of ethics around that. And so you have to go through, the ethical vetting, and all of that takes a lot of time. So I just had that go through. I had a positive answer from them for just a week back or so. So what I've been doing this first year is basically, you know, just preparing myself in a lot of different ways, and you know, reading and you know, contacting people, and so I'm just about to start doing my interviews in about a month or so, and then I will progress over the coming years. I don't have so much to tell you, but from what I've been doing earlier, I've been doing interview studies before, so this is kind of, you know, familiar territory for me in a way. But I think it's very important for us to talk about gender in contemporary spirituality, because we sometimes have this idea about contemporary spirituality that is non-hierarchical, that it's, you know, that we don't have the things that we associate maybe with institutional religion, and where we feel like, well, you know, there's a lot of power, there's hierarchies, there's normativity when it comes to gender structures and so on, and we feel like we don't have this in contemporary spirituality. But from what I see, it's right there, and it's influencing a lot of people. So I'm not there to kind of judge that or say that, you know, this is wrong, it should be like this. You know, I'm just observing and showing some different ways to think about this, you know. And I from what I noticed, for a lot of female practitioners especially, it's very important to kind of, you know, be able to put your finger on and see what is actually going on in contemporary spirituality, and who are deciding what is called feminine, what is called masculine, how we work with polarity, all of these different things that we tend to do in contemporary Tantra, which is not something that I practice personally. I practice in, you know, the classical traditions of Tantra, such as Kashmir Shaivism, and that is a completely different conversation to speak about, you know, how they differ, and if we can really draw a line between, you know, different traditions in that way. I would say that we can't really. But I just want to make it clear that what I practice and teach is meditation and philosophy, and not, you know, sexual techniques or intimacy training and those things that we usually associated with contemporary Tantra. So I don't know.
I'm gonna look forward to like talking to you when you're done and like getting into the details, because I think it's such an important topic as well, and we got into it in the course a little bit as well. And I'm thinking about like one thing that came up, maybe one last thing, is how, and we spoke about right before we started recording, like the effects of the world structures on how we view religions that are not like native to us, and how like we've named, I can't say we, like not us, but yeah, those that colonialized and went there and did stuff. And for me, that's also a really important topic, because my people have been colonialized and are still occupied. So there's this sense of being fit in, or like everything that we also studied with how the naming started and why it was named Hinduism, but it's like a so much deeper topic than just naming this huge geographical area of different practices into, because we have it from a dogmatic lens maybe of how we view religion. And that's what I'm thinking really much about that now as we're doing the course in society and religion, and how also just the research is also, I'm thinking about like the research has also been maybe biased from gender and from Eurocentric studies. When it comes to Tantra, it's what I've experienced, at least, and I wanted to have your take on it, is that it's, I think most people when they hear Tantra, they immediately, even someone who's not even familiar that much with yoga connected to the sexual practice or like intimacy. And that narrative is still there, and what you're doing is completely different, and you're really like honoring the traditions and like the classical part. It's two different things. But is there a certain like cultural appropriation in the way that in West Tantra is the word even just being used for practices that has no connection? I don't know. Does it have connection, or is it sometimes something completely different, but they call it something that might attract people to it?
Well, the first thing that I would say is that language is power, right? If it's something that we learn from the Indian traditions, is that, you know, the word or the sound creates. The word or the sound becomes manifestation. And that is why a mantra, for example, is so important in the tantric traditions. And that is something that I also speak about in the book, just, you know, the fact that in a way in the Indian traditions and the way that some language theorists will think about it is that really when we create a concept, we also create reality, or we structure reality in a way. So there's a lot to say about that, in just like when we name something, what it does to that structure. But coming back to appropriation and tantra, I mean, this goes for yoga too, but maybe it's even worse when it comes to tantra right now. And it's also complicated because tantra has kind of a bad reputation historically as well, right? But we don't really have time to go into that right now. Yes, there is absolutely appropriation. And at the same time, what I would say as a scholar of religion is that, you know, no religious tradition has ever not evolved over time of being influenced by other traditions and so on. And in the globalized society that we have right now, all traditions are being influenced by each other. There is no way to get around that, you know. So to say that you have this untouched, this pure, this essential tradition, that is, you know, that is a lie. But of course we can have something that is more or less watered down, you know, in different ways. And so I know that the scholar of modern yoga, Mark Singleton, he wrote in his book Yoga Body that came out in 2010 that, you know, maybe we can think of yoga as a homonym, meaning that, you know, it's the same word, but it means something completely different to different people. And the same way with tantra. Then of course the problem in the appropriation of yoga and tantra is the power imbalance between the West and the East, so to speak, when it comes to the fact that, you know, the West actually colonized the East. And so we can't just say, take it so easily, or just shrug our shoulders and be like, well, you know, all traditions borrow from each other, or, you know, modern yoga or modern tantra is actually not at all, you know, Indian in a way, because it's been influenced by so many different things. But we have to linger a little bit with that problematic piece of just the fact that, you know, it's not okay to just take a word like this from a tradition that you previously colonized and just do whatever you feel like with it. I mean, yeah, I don't really have the articulation for it today. I have too much of a cold. My words are not really coming through. But I would, as usual, when we talk about these kind of things, it's a yes and no. You know, there's the paradox of it, of just being clear about the fact that according to non-dual traditions, there is no, you know, essential self or essential tradition, or, you know, essential nation, or, you know, all of these claims are kind of false. And then at the same time, in a relative sense, we have to really respect the cultural traditions of different people, and not think that we can use, for example, borrow the gods from a different tradition and place them on our yoga mats and then walk all over them and think, this is cool, because it's not really a deity. This is just, something that I, associate with a product that I called yoga. I didn't give you a brilliant answer now, but the closest to it. It's a yes and no, right? We can't just shout appropriation at every moment, because if we believe in past lives, for example, if we believe in reincarnation, then who are we to say that, we don't have a different lineage or a different historical background than the one that we're actually set in for the moment? And at the same time, we can't just use that as an excuse. That would be spiritual bypassing, right? To say, well, if you believe in reincarnation, I might actually be just as Indian as you are. That is a really ugly behavior towards other human beings, right? So I think we spoke about that last time, that the capacity to hold an absolute perspective and a relative perspective at the same time. And I would say that the relative perspective is, yes, there is appropriation going on, and we should be really careful when it comes to that. And the absolute perspective would be, well, there is, if we believe in the non-dual traditions, then we have to also believe in the fact that this human, body is just something that I'm with for a really short time, and that, the self might have had other experiences previously, right?
Yeah, that's very true.
We can't really own traditions. We can't really own, even though people are definitely trying for the moment.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's many perspectives on this, and I think that also like the importance of this studying and the research, and like sometimes when we're doing things or putting something out, just the thought of it, like how could this be something that is not I think we are becoming more and more aware of it than we were even like a decade ago. So even like in my new Oracle card deck, I have a lot of representation, but I also chose to, when it came to temples, using Kurdish temples, for example, because I felt like I could like stand behind it, and it's my ancestral heritage. But I also have Asian heritage and Southeast Asian heritage, but still being very like, as you said, it's like two ways, because we've been it all. We are all part of it. I've also seen that certain topics can. There was also like a discussion about appropriation of Kurdish symbols, like, and it's not even that widespread. So it's really interesting, and also that some traditions are more tied to ethnic backgrounds, but some traditions are not. I mean, then what would we say about Christianity? It's a Middle Eastern phenomenon that spread in the whole world. So everyone is like practicing it from different backgrounds. So maybe, like you said, the globalization will also do that to certain other traditions, being very like mindful and respecting. Like you said, West and East have different moral and ethics, which maybe some things, me growing up in the West, but with this Middle Eastern background, I have certain ways of viewing things. And, like in the Hindu tradition, the feet have like certain things you don't do with the feet on top of, like, it's not respectable, or how you treat food or something like that. So it's really what you said. It's I think that more and more, like, especially with people like you who have that deep knowledge and embodied practice, and you've written this beautiful book that this publisher also like was really excited to get translated. It has a lot of credibility and value in it. So I'm really excited for you to share it with the world, and I would definitely recommend everyone to connect with that. I'll put the link in the show notes for everyone that wants to check it out. It's available on Amazon and maybe other platforms as well, but I'll share it there. And is there anything else that you feel is important to share now before we...
I just want to excuse my lack of articulation and all of the foolish things that I might have said.
No, not at
and
all.
just hopefully I'm more well articulated and express myself better in the book. That is that is what I hope. And just thank you for speaking to me again, and good luck with your studies. And I'm looking forward to speaking to you again soon.
Yeah, me too. And thank you so much for... Yeah.
And I just wanted to say that for those of you that get the book in English, there is an online course coming up this autumn where I will, have an online class for every chapter. So that will start this autumn. And if you're studying in Swedish, a course like that is already available on my platform. So just go to Saraswati Studies and you will find it there.
I love that. I was going to share that you have online courses as well for everyone to check out, to go deeper. And and the book is going to be a good way to start, but getting deeper with the course that's upcoming, I believe that can help to have both aspects, not just the reading aspect, but also so I'm really excited for you, and congratulations on the book. And thank you so much again for coming on here and sharing so many beautiful things with all of us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.